Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to day 2 of the virtual 737 course. We had an amazing session yesterday, Petter, didn't we? What a great start to the session.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. It's just as fun as I remember it. And I'm really looking forward to today's session as well, because I know that there's a lot of people that have a lot of questions about the subject that we will be covering today, which is largely the flight management computer, the FMC.
Yeah, and it's one of those kind of root causes of a lot of problems. We spoke about that yesterday with the setup. And I just sent an email out to people saying that, with the FMC, it can look a little bit daunting, but once you understand the structure of it, it kind of becomes a lot more simple. And the old GIGO principle applies here: the garbage in, garbage out. If we put something wrong in here, it's going to manifest itself and bite us in the backside at some point. So we're just going to take you through not only the what we do, but why we do it that way and what possibly might go wrong if we don't. And you're also going to get a look at how we would brief a departure. It's not just random words. We have a good structure to this, and we're going to take you through that in real time, show you some checklists, how Petra and I would do it if we were flying, but also how we can do it when we're operating single pilot in the sim.
And again, guys, we are restreaming this onto the Mentor Now channel as well. We decided after some hugely positive feedback yesterday that we would continue doing so, at least for the free part with this free course. And it's for you who are on the Mentor Now channel, you won't have access to the workbooks and the flight plans and the charts and everything. That's all in the Facebook group. So if you want to get access to that, you're still going to have to go to the Facebook group. Now, people have been asking me, why do we have to go through Facebook? There's no other way of doing it. And the fact is that that's just the easiest and best way that we found to kind of host both the workbook, the PDF, and the chart, and do the video stream, and also have the community in one place.
Yeah.
So we are looking at ways to solve this going forward. But at the moment, you can watch this here with us on the Mentor Now channel or on Facebook. But if you want to really the full kind of experience, you should go in and use the links to join the Facebook group.
Correct. And talking about community, it is still mind-blowing when we see so many great, positive, like-minded people, and there's such a wide variety in the group, from people that are literally just starting out all the way through to qualified airline pilots and everyone in between. But there's this common thread between all of us of this just love of aviation, and wanting to learn more, and the wonderful 737 as well. So it's lovely to see this common thread uniting people around the globe in this common thread.
And the Nerd Bell.
And the Nerd Bell, of course, absolutely. Yeah, we had a good live Q&A today, and the Nerd Bell came out. So every day this week, I'm live at 12 UTC, where I answer your questions on pretty much anything aviation related, but particularly to anything that we did the day before. Had a great session. Petter joined us. Nerd Bell does come out quite a lot because we do geek out a little bit and go quite deep into some systems. So if you want to do that tomorrow, I'll be live tomorrow as well at 12 UTC. But hi, everybody signing in. Great to see so many of you here. And we're going to kind of dive in now, Petter. So we're going to play around with the screen a little bit to hopefully give you the best of both. And let us know what you think about that. So what we're going to be doing is carrying on from where we left off. So yesterday we did the whole pre-flight setup, so that we got the aircraft from what we call cold and dark, where it's fast asleep, and took it so that it's now ready to basically go apart from the FMC. And that's what we're going to dive into now and take you through a methodical, logical way of setting up the FMC. And then we're going to do a standard departure briefing, something we do on every single flight. And then we're going to finish off with the before takeoff checklists. And then we kind of leave that there ready for tomorrow. And this is where this bit here is putting in the groundwork, so we get all the action right in the subsequent sessions. But excellent. Right, Petter, so let's have a look. So we are now basically where we left off. Everything's done. We've done the bell checks. We've done the rainbow scan, the waterfall flows. We've done everything. We finished off yesterday, if you remember, down at the rudder and aileron trim. And now in real life, I'd be jumping into the flight management computer, which is completely blank, and going into the setup. Now, hopefully those of you in the Facebook group did see the flight plan that I put out in there. I also emailed it out as well. So hopefully you've got that. And I also annotated one. So it's got like little numbers, 1, 2, 3, 4. But we're also going to share our screen for those of you that may not have seen that yet. And we're going to play around with that so we can see what you would see on the flight plan, as well as what I would then be doing with the FMC. Because in real life, Petra and I would have our iPad up with the flight plan on our knee, and we'd be typing into the FMC from that. So hopefully you can get a feel for that as we go through it.
Yeah.
Right.
Bear with me a little bit, though, guys, because I'm going to be sharing screens left, right, and center here. So we're going to do our best. Hopefully, you'll be able to see from it. But like Ben is saying, concentrate on how he is inputting things into the FMC. Because those of you who are part of the group, you will already have access to the workbook, and you can work from there.
Yeah, that's it. So we're going to give this a go now. And obviously, this will work better on a big screen. So if you're on a small screen, not so good. But hopefully you'll still be able to get the message of what we're doing here. So I'm going to dive into the FMC here. And this is where we left off. We input the coordinates into the FMC to allow the IRS, the inertial reference system, to align itself. And that's where we get off. Now, the FMC will guide you through the standard process. There's a lot of buttons on here, and it's very easy to get lost at first. So we're going to show you the Boeing logical sort of steps to take you through this. Now, we start on the position initialization page. That's how it boots up when you first get power on it. We've put the coordinates in yesterday. And now on the bottom right of the screen, you can see it says route. And this is how the FMC will guide you naturally to the next step. And it will take you through this. So the next step is going to be route. So what I would do is we'll line select that with the key next to it. And as you can see, that's going to take us now to the route page of the FMC. And it has an origin and it has a destination. Now, Petra's got the flight plan up there. And for those of you following, if you look at number, we're going to basically follow the order that we've got up in the flight plan, and we're going to enter this in. Now, you can see at the top of the flight plan at number 1, we've got the code. So Echo Golf Sierra Sierra, that's the standard ICAO code for London Stansted. All UK airports begin with EG, Echo Golf, and then the last 2 differentiate the airport. So Heathrow is EG, LL, etc. And Dublin, all Irish airports are Echo India. And then the last 2 will show you the actual specific airport. So we're going to copy it, literally copy it, and straight into the FMC. So the first one,
here comes a little nice feature, which is that you have already put the position in when you did that in the first step. And since you did that, and you also told the FMC where that was, so you were in Echo Golf Sierra Sierra, it will now suggest that as maybe this is what you want to use as your origin. So it's already down in the scratch pad for you.
Yeah. Saves a little bit of finger work. So we're going to be doing a lot of finger work now. So that's already in this scratch pad, this area that we can type into. It's already populated, as Petra said. So I'm going to pop that in our origin. So you just to get it from here to there, you go to the line select key next to that, and that pops in. Now you can see that these are box prompts. And if you remember from yesterday, the box prompts as opposed to the dashes are mandatory. So it says, right, if you want to go flying, we need to know where we're going. And again, if you go back to the flight plan, you can see at note 1 at the top there, we've got Echo India Delta Whiskey, which is sure enough Dublin. And I'm going to type that in, and then I'm going to line select it next to that. And then we go down. If you see number 2 on the flight plan, we've got our call sign. Now today we're a special flight. We're Butter 001. So we put our code BTR 001. If you're British Airways, it'd be BAW 001 if you're a Concorde. Every airline has their own designator, but for us today, we're Butter. So flight plan, and that's what ATC see on their radar screen. So it's really important that we put that in correctly, because when we pop up on the radar, it will say Butter 001, and they know who we are.
Yeah. So if you screw this up and something happens to you, then whatever you've written in there is also what's going to pop up on Flight Radar 24, for example, or any of those tracking sites, because this is the mode S transponder code. Yeah. And in the beginning, when we started doing this, everyone put the wrong things in, and the controllers would come back and it's like, Butter, are you sure you're Butter 061? Are you sure you're not Butter 001? Yeah. And we'd all have to go in and change that, and which you can do when you're airborne as well. Yeah. So now, yeah. Before Ben continues here, you see there's something called a CO route next to it, which stands for company route. Now, this is something that we don't really use. I don't know, other airlines might be using them, because if you have that, if you have a company route and that's in your flight plan, you can just enter that and it will pre-populate the whole route for you. But that's cheating, so we won't be doing that.
No, we used to do it in the KLM UK days. We used to have company routes, and it was great because you could just put in the KLM blah blah blah, and it would just populate everything for you. But we do random routes nowadays, so we don't do that. Yeah. Are we going to be talking about SIDs and stars today? Certainly SID charts today. Yes, we will be. We're going to be looking at how we brief those as well. So that's coming. So we go to the flight plan now. So for the departure, we would have got our ATIS, and it says today that we're departing on runway 22. So we type runway 22 in there, and that's going to populate that. Now at the top right of the screen, you can see we've got route 1 of 2. So that tells you we have 2 pages now. And to get to the second page, because now we've got to tell it, we're telling it where we're coming from and where we're going. We now need to tell it how we're going to get there, our route effectively. So now if you just go down to the FMC and press next page, it's going to be a fairly blank route page 2 of 2. So what do you go and do here now, Peter? How would you go to this page first, or would you go to a different one?
So I am a fan of using the departure arrivals page.
Yeah.
Okay. Because the way that I build this flight plan is I think through, okay, the FMC is now asking me, what do you want to do? What's your plan here, right? And my plan will always start with a standard instrument departure, an SID. Now, Ben has already put runway 22 in there, but if you go to the departure arrivals page, the button on the CDU, you'll see that that will give you the options. In the top here, you have departures and arrivals. Go to runway 22. Now, here's why I tend to choose the runway from here, because as you can see, runway 22 is already selected, right? That's great. That's because Ben has put that in. However, if you go up and you go to the right side and you line select 22, like that, it will now reduce the number of departures to only departures that goes from runway 22. So instead of having all of them from, in this case, to both the runways, now you only have them that depart from runway 22, which makes your life a little bit easier. So I tend to go to departures arrivals page, choose the departure runway, then choose the departure SID that I'm expecting, and then I will go back to the route page.
Yeah, and that's a really logical way of doing it. It kind of makes sense in your brain, because now you've got where you're going, where you're coming, and where you're going to. So we're going to now start this up. So we've selected runway 22, and if you go to the second page of the flight plan, where I've highlighted number 3 there, we have our route ID. And it will start with Echo Golf Sierra Sierra runway 22. And then after that, you will see what we call our SID, our standard instrument departure, which is a set profile that we will fly based on where we're going. And today we're doing what's known as the UTAVA 1 Romeo. So again, we've got 2 pages here. If you're flying into somewhere like Barcelona or Madrid, there can be pages and pages and pages of these. So we have to be careful we get the right one, because as you can see, there's shortened versions in here. So we're going to go down to the UTAV 1 Romeo, which is the UTAVA 1 Romeo, and I'm going to line select that. So now we've got runway 22, UTAVA 1 Romeo. And what we need to do now is go back to our departure arrival page. You can either press index or you can press departure arrival. It does the same thing. And then you can come down to the arrivals runway for Dublin. So you select Dublin arrivals. And again, we're expecting runway 28 left. So you can see there's 12 pages here. So we don't want the visuals. We're going to keep going down. ILS 28 left on page 2.
So here, it's worth pointing out that on the flight plan, we have runway 28 right.
Have we? Yes, we do. My bad. I can do that. We can do it right. Yeah.
But it's a good point. So not like what you would have to put in here is what you expect to get. Yeah. Right? The flight plan would have been issued by the flight planning department, and they might just put a runway in there. But you might know from experience or from a previous flight or something that another runway is in, then it's perfectly okay to put that in. So the flight plan might not always be 100% correct when it comes to that.
Yeah, good spot, everyone. And Kendra's just pointed out that the name of today's stream in Facebook is just saying the Q&A. So it looks like I did change it, but maybe it didn't actually execute that. So I will change that back as soon as this is finished. I'll change it to reflect day 2. So Kendra, thank you for spotting that. I will amend that. Thank you. Lulu says it's actually showing how to program it. So hopefully that's working. Okay, we'll look into that. So for the purpose of this, we'll keep it accurate and we will select 28 right. And you can see that on the flight plan at the end of it, it comes up with a star, a standard terminal arrival route, which takes you from the airways down to the first point of the approach. So that's the Bagzo 3 Lima. So we've got here Bags 3 Lima. And we have a transition. Now we might not know what the transition is at this point. And that's fine. if we have the time, we can go to the charts and then we can see them. I mean, Peter, what is a transition? How would you, if you're going to kind of briefly sort of summarize what that is?
Okay, so transition basically, normally, especially at bigger airports, the standard arrival route, will bring you to a specific point. And then from that point, there's going to be further routing that is specific for the arriving runway, basically.
Yeah.
So in this case, we are being brought in by a BAGSO arrival. Once that happens, you can always, it's always a good guess that maybe it connects to something called BAGSO, because it tends to be the last point of the route, which is also the first name of the transition. But basically, it's a continuation of the route. So if you don't put this transition in, the route does not connect to the approach. But once you put the transition in, that is literally the transition onto the final approach fix, which will then bring you down to the runway.
Yeah, and I will show this in another video coming up, and maybe in the Q&A I'll show you a couple of examples. But I'm just going to select a Beano at this point. And now we've put our departure and arrival, we can go back to the route page. Okay, and what you'll see now is some of it is now populated from what we've just put in. So if I go back to route, page 2, you can see now we have via and to. So we're getting airborne off 22, and we're going via the Utava 1 Romeo standard instrument departure to a waypoint called Utava. And Utava will be the first waypoint along a route or an airway. And then we can go back to our flight plan on the second page of the flight plan where I've circled 3, where that route ID is, and I would program that in. So I'll program that in Petra now, and you can, you'll be obviously, in real life, you might either coming back from the walk around now or whatever, but I'm just going to program this in. So it says Utava, and then we go via an airway, and that airway is called Quebec 75. So we put that in there. So we're going from Utava along an airway called Quebec 75. They're like motorways, if you like. And that's going to another waypoint called Buzzard. So I'm going to type that in, and we go to Buzzard.
So the way to think about the waypoints as you're programming this is that waypoints are like intersections on roads, right? The roads to Quebec 75 goes to Buzzard. At Buzzard, intersection goes onto a different road, which in this case is Tango 420, proceeds to Trent intersection, where it hooks up with the next airway, which is Upper Lima 28, and then to Leldo. So that's the way to think about it. This is the way that they build these routes as we fly between different destinations.
Yeah. And it's important, you can see that after Leldo, it just fills it automatically direct to the first point of the start. That doesn't matter. You can put your waypoint over the direct, and that will open up. You can either put something here, and you can see actually you fix it up to BAGSO, because that's what's on the flight plan. And then it continues all the way. So now we have a completed route page in there, and it takes us all the way to the approach transition, to the ILS 28 right, all the way through to a missed approach.
Yeah.
And then we finish this page, but we will now activate it, but we won't execute it. So what we're doing here, by pressing activate, the execute light will come on, which means that it's now becoming in a position ready that we can execute our route. So we're going to activate it, but we're not going to do any more at this stage. And we'll go into why we don't do any more. Right. So now we can go to the performance page. So we can start entering our performance. So if we go to the INIT ref, which is the initial reference page, you'll see this performance initialization page, which allows us to put a variety of data into this to let the aircraft know how heavy it is, how much fuel we've got, what cruise altitude we're going to, and that will then calculate things like your climb speeds, cruise speeds, descent speeds, etc. Now, if we go back to page 1 of the flight plan, where you can see I've got number 4 circled, it says cruise system there, and it's got CI 56. Now, CI is cost index. And cost index is basically a system that allows airlines to specify how much they value fuel or how much they value time. So the lower the number, the less fuel burn they're going to have, but the flight will be longer. The higher the number, the faster you're flying, but the more fuel we're burning. So in this example, we're using a cost index of 56, which is a fairly average one. Reserves. So reserves, to get our reserves, we go down to the bottom of that first page where I've circled 5, and you can see FinRes and alternate. And that's our minimum fuel we need on board if we're going to divert from Dublin to our alternate and still land with a sensible amount of fuel. So we we round that up, Petter, don't we, to like 2.5?
Yes, we do.
So we pop that in to there.
Good question.
Yeah, easy question. And then we go up to number 6 towards the top half of that flight plan, where we have our zero fuel weight. Now, the zero fuel weight is pretty much what it says on the tin there. It's the weight of the aircraft and everything in it except the fuel. So it's all of this, the aircraft itself, it's all the passengers, it's all the bags, it's the crew, the catering, but no fuel on board. And you can see that it's a mandatory prompt. And if you go to your flight plan there, it says 59.5, so 59,500 kilos. And as soon as I pop that in there, it's going to add the fuel that it's sensing on board the aircraft and giving us a gross weight, so our total weight of the aircraft. There we go. So actually we're 66 tons today. And our cruise altitude today, number 7 on the flight plan, you can see that it's generated a cruising altitude of flight level 360, 36,000 feet. So I would put that now up here.
You might ask yourself, I mean, it's a very short flight over towards Dublin. It's about an hour and 15 minutes or something like that. So why would you go that high then?
Yeah, why would we go that high? Well, the most efficient route, believe it or not, is kind of like a parabolic loop where you get airborne and you climb as high as you can, and as soon as you get there, you close the thrust levers, you get an idle descent, and you descend. That kind of parabolic route. That's actually the most efficient, believe it or not, to get high as you can and then immediately close the thrust levers and descend. So the flight plan will look at the winds aloft. It will go, what winds are up there? Where are the stronger tailwinds or the lesser of the headwinds, if you like? It will look at your weight and it will generate this in a computer and go, okay, the most efficient route for us today is 36,000 feet. Or it might be just capped because of air traffic. Maybe they wanted 380, submitted the flight plan, and it gets rejected. And they go, no, you can't do that, but you can go at 36,000 feet.
You'll see that, for example, if there is a period of a lot of ATC strikes in Europe, you'll see aircraft flying at very, very strange altitudes, sometimes very low.
Yeah.
And that can be because there are restraints at higher levels. So there might be air traffic controllers, I'm just going to say in France, just as an example, that might be reducing the capacity in certain airspaces. And then you might have a 737 cruising at flight level 280 or 28,000 feet, for example. So if you see something weird like that on flight radar 24, that might be one of the reasons.
Yeah. And even though we're filed at 360, there's nothing stopping us when we get airborne and we're coming up to our cruise level to actually request higher if it becomes efficient for us to do so. And sometimes we'll get it, sometimes we won't. But that's what we'd at least start with. Now, the cruise wind underneath that is, we'd actually normally get that actually our top of climb waypoint. So we get a snapshot of the wind when we reach 36,000 feet. And if we go to page 5 of the flight plan, actually, there's lots of TOCs, which is top of climb. So we go to top of climb, which is page 5, the first waypoint in page 5. I actually haven't put a number on this, but it's the very first waypoint there. And as you go further right along that flight plan, you can see wind component, and the actual wind at top of climb today is 276 degrees at 51 knots. So I would put 276/51, which means at the top of climb, that is the wind at that point on the flight. And that's quite an important step, because when we climb in VNAV, it's going to try and get us there in a set distance. So if you've got a very strong headwind, you'll see your climb speed is actually very fast. Whereas if you've got a really strong tailwind, your climb speed might be a lot lower. But we're going to get to that waypoint at the same place in space, if that makes sense. So
and since we're on that topic and we're looking at this part of the flight plan, we're not going to go into this much deeper at the moment, but we can see here as well that the wind is coming from 276 degrees. Now we're going from Stansted to Dublin, so we're going westward. So we have a headwind of 33 knots. And below that, there's a little number saying shear, SHR. This is actually indicating how much turbulence that we can expect. So for those of you who are nervous flyers out there, this is one of the indications that we have as pilots that this might be a little bit turbulent, and anything above 3 is considered potential turbulence. Below 3, not so much, right? But if it goes 3, this is an indefinite number. It can go up to 1,356. You know, it can go as high as possible. But I've never seen it much higher than 10. And if you get that, you tend to get quite a bit of turbulence.
Yeah, you could do. It's certainly a heads up. Yeah, and someone's got a good question saying that why would we not just use the average wind? The average wind could be good, but an average wind takes the wind for the entire route. So if we've got a 4 or 5 hour flight, it's taking the average wind of that entire flight, which could be very, very different to the wind you're experiencing in your climb. So this gives us the most accurate wind for our climb phase and enables us to set a more accurate speed for that element of the flight. So that's generally why we would do that. And these winds are actually very accurate, surprisingly accurate normally. They're very good.
Now, people might ask there, sorry, I'm just going to put a little bit of power to my stuff here. Why would that be important? Well, obviously, you might get clearances or you might get questions from air traffic control asking, can you be level by a certain waypoint? Because they want to make sure that people can come in below us, for example. And if we don't have the correct weather, like Ben was saying before, shit in, shit out, then we won't be able to make that prediction. So we want to have as much and as accurate data as possible fed into the flight management computer so that we can rely on it as much as we can.
Yeah, exactly. And the wind does change a lot throughout the flight, and the average wind, which we'll put in later, will actually take account for that. So good. So we come down. The rest of it we're going to leave at this point because it's done. And then you can see bottom right again, it prompts us to the next section, which is our takeoff performance. So this is called our N1 limit. Now the N1 is the name given to the big fan at the front of the engine that you can see spinning. That's our N1 fan. There's also a compressor further in the engine, which is an N2, and some engines even have another higher pressure one further in, which is your N3. But we have our thrust is based on N1. And on the 737-800, we have 3 or 4 thrust settings that we can use for takeoff. And they're measured in thousands of pounds of thrust. So we've got 26,000 pounds of thrust, 24,000 pounds of thrust, 22,000 pounds of thrust. And if we really need a bit of extra oomph, we've got a 27,000 pound of thrust bump, which just bumps it up to 27,000 if we really, really need it. Now, the aim here is to, believe it or not to go full beans everywhere. You know, why pedal? Why do we not just go full power even though that'd be quite good fun? Why don't we?
Well, first of all, the engines are you know, they're very big. There's some, in most cases, overpowered because this aircraft can lift up to 78 tons, and we tend to maybe go with 66, 67 tons in most of the cases, which means that it would you know, create a very significant acceleration, which is good fun, but it will also burn engine life. Right. Yeah. So the more time that the engines are left in takeoff power, the closer it will be between the maintenance intervals. Certain parts needs to be replaced a little bit earlier, and it burns more fuel and it makes more noise. So that's 3 things that the airlines really don't like: extra maintenance costs, extra fuel burn, and potential noise complaints. Mm-hmm. So if we can reduce that, which means that we can check how much we actually weigh, what's the outside temperature, what's the wind, and then we can find out, right, how much thrust do we actually need in order to make a safe takeoff? That's what we're trying to do now.
Yeah, and by selecting one of these, so normally for like a Dublin flight, we'd be light enough that we would calculate this in our takeoff performance, which we're not going to do now, but I can go into in a Q&A tomorrow if you'd like to know a little bit more about that. But it's quite a big topic in itself. But we would basically put in all the data for today. So the runway we're using, the weather, winds, temperature, all that kind of stuff, and it will tell us what the D rate we can have to get airborne with. Now today I've done that already, and we can take 22K. So by selecting this, you can see, so at full power, we've got 98.4% N1. That's that's the thrust that it would give at 26K. We're going to select 22K, and that brings it down to 92%. 17 degrees outside at the moment. And we can also do something called an assumed temperature, or a flex if you're coming from the Airbus world, that tricks the engine into thinking that the temperature outside is hotter. Remember, if it's hotter outside, the air is less dense, the engines don't perform quite as well. So we can kind of say, look, we can reduce that thrust a bit more. And I'll go more into why and how we would do this in the Q&A tomorrow. But today we can take an assumed temperature of 30 degrees, and that brings it down just a little bit more. So that's what we're using today. And then we would go over to our takeoff page. From that same calculation, it would give us a takeoff flap setting. The standard one normally is flap 5. That's a good takeoff setting to have. So if you go to flap 5, that's going to generate now some speeds. from the internal computer. So I'm going to pop that in, and the speeds would also be calculated by our onboard performance tool, our OPT, and we would cross-check these in a moment when we do the performance. But again, for this, we'll assume that we've cross-checked it already, and normally these are within about 1 knot. The accuracy of the FMC is very good. If they were more than 1 knot difference, we would take the OPT data instead, because that's the master document, if you like. So we've got a V1 today of 140 knots. We just select it. A rotation speed, the point we start initiating the takeoff, and V2, which is our single engine takeoff safety speed of 146. Now, I'll give you a little nugget here, a little bit of a gross error check, because I like these, I call them anti-embarrassment checks, you know, little things that you can just catch just to see that you haven't made a mistake somewhere and you're going to embarrass yourself. And a great little thing to do is, if you take 20 off of your gross weight, that should equal your V2 plus or minus a couple of knots. So if I'm 66 tons, minus 20 is 46. That means my V2 should be 146. And sure enough, there it is. If I saw that as one, yeah, that's worthy of a nerd bell, surely. And you know, it's a simple thing, but it always works. And you know, if I look down and I saw 135, it would prompt me to go, hang on a minute, have we done something wrong here? You know, it might not always be exact, but it's within a knot or two. It's, you know, for 20 years, that's kind of seen me good. So that's one of many anti-embarrassment checks that I use, and it works really, really well. So we'll assume we also get a center of gravity calculation. So we put in the passenger load into this performance tool. We tell them how many people are sitting in the forward, the middle, and the back, how many bags we've got, how much fuel we've got, and it works out where the center of gravity of the aircraft is. And today we're at 19%, and that should give us a trim that we set down. If I can do it, just change view slightly. We would set that down in here. So this is our stabilizer trim. And if you've got questions on this, I can certainly get geeky with you in the Q&A tomorrow.
Yeah, so I think it's probably worth highlighting here, Ben, again, that like we will do, this is an overview of how we set this up.
Yeah.
And all of the ones that have signed up to the course on the Facebook page, they will get access to you at 12 o'clock Zulu, where, is it 12 o'clock Zulu or is it 12 o'clock? Yeah, so 12 o'clock Zulu, where you will be able to answer all sorts of questions, anything they have, anything they want to know, anything that's extra nerded, goes into detail, that's where you'll find it. So, because we don't have time to kind of go into the Q&As at this moment. So do sign up to the Facebook group and to that part of the course, because that's really where everything happens throughout the day.
Yeah. Absolutely. It's definitely worth doing. And the Q&As are a lot of fun because it's really, really interactive. I'm there purely to answer your questions. So it's really interactive. I can look at all the comments in there and we can bounce stuff off each other. And I have the sim up as well. So potentially you can demonstrate things to you as well in real time. So it's a really, really fun session. So yeah, hopefully see you tomorrow at 12 UTC.
Yeah, because we get questions right now, like where did that 19 come from? Well, the 19 would have come from our operational performance tool, our OPT, where, like Ben was saying, where we have put in all of the other figures, but where people are seated and stuff. But to save time now, we're just taking this one, and we will clarify that later.
Yeah, because the performance side of it is actually quite a big topic and something we will go into in the future. But for this, it would just extend it a bit too long if we go into that now. So we'll assume that we've done that, and I have done that. But for those of you in the sim, if you haven't got, the virtual performance tool is a great tool, and a big shout out to Navigraph, who supply the charts. They're an excellent setup. If you want charts for your sim, Navigraph is where you can get them from. Yeah, they're the same as real life. They do say do not use for real flight, but they're exactly the same. So big shout out to Navigraph. They're a great company. So yeah, we do that. But if you want a ballpark figure for a normal kind of, as long as you're not somewhere really short or somewhere very high, if you select maybe 22K, flat 5 and 19% CFG, that's generally fairly average, six units of stab trim, you're never going to be a million miles away. That's probably going to work for you, but we will go more into performance coming up. So I would now set that trim. It says 6.1, and this is something we would normally do as a crew, but I'm going to set that back until the little white arrow points. Now you can see the trim is 6.1. It gets very accurate, but you can see on here actually that it's difficult to get super accurate on this, but there's, it's back.
I'm back. Yeah. So, well, what would happen here is that when we're doing this together, the captain and first officer, we will agree on the stab trim to be set from the FMC once we've done this. But one thing that's important to remember if you're a budding first officer out there is that when you do set this, make sure that you guard the captain's leg with your hand, right? It's something that you don't think about, but these things, they spin really, really quickly. And sometimes when you're sitting in the seat, since we're looking at the FMC, you kind of turn that way, so you have your leg kind of inside of this trim wheel, believe it or not, because it's kind of open. And the problem is that you have the foldable little handle that you're supposed to use when you're using it manually. So if you don't remind the captain or the first officer, but the captain normally, to move his or her leg, well, then the next thing that's going to happen is like, back, and it's a really bad way to start the day. So just think of that, please, because my right leg is a bit sore still.
Yeah. My right leg has definitely got the battle scars of quite a few years of that happening. So, and it certainly wakes you up at 5 o'clock in the morning, doesn't it?
And those are the kind of things that you will not find in any flight manual, guys, but just ignore
it. Yeah. So there you go. So we've set the stab trim now, and we've got that kind of performance set up. Now, what we would do now, so now we've got this, I've programmed the FMC up. We're now in a position where the first officer would be back from the walk around. They've set up they've done their SLEO way checks. Watch yesterday's session to remind yourself on those, and got everything set up. They filled out their OPT as well. We would have done maybe the performance together. And now we can go into our standard pre-flight briefing kind of protocol. We have a standard way of briefing it. Now, every airline's slightly different, but for the purpose of demonstrating, we're just going to use a standard, one of many ways of doing it. And again, it's an acronym. We love acronyms because it's a great way of reminding you what you're going to do next. And it's a great way of training cadets as well. So we're going to use something affectionately known as RIBETS. It's in the workbook if you'd like to have a look at it there as well. But it prompts us to go through a very sensible, logical order. And woven in through this, it's a real hot topic in aviation and has been for a while. We're going to bring in TEM, threat and error management. It's a great way of trying to anticipate what could try and catch us out today. Every day it's a bit different. Every airport's different. You can fly to the same airport in 2 consecutive days, and the threats that you're identifying could be very, very different. And it's something that we will speak about together. And when we find something that could potentially affect us, and we'll give you some demos in a moment, not only do we identify and go, that could catch us out, we also talk about what we're going to do to prevent it catching us out. So identifying it is only 50% of the job. So for those of you that are starting type rating soon, just remember that one, because it's a common kind of error that can happen. They go, okay, the threat is, I don't know, strong crosswind. Great. Okay, that's true. So what are we going to do to prevent that becoming an issue for us? So we'll give you some examples of that as well.
I mean, a great example is that the video that I did a couple of weeks ago with the FedEx 757 that went accidentally landed on the wrong runway after a night flight. That was actually one of the findings from the final report on that incident, because they said that if the pilots would have sat down and identified, A, we're feeling tired, B, what should we do about it? They would have probably come up with an idea where they didn't do a visual approach at 4 o'clock in the morning, and that would have stopped it all from happening, right? Yeah. So that's a perfect example. Like, it's a beautiful day or beautiful night in this case, good weather, perfect for a visual approach in normal cases. But in this case, feeling a little bit so-and-so, it's early in the morning, let's just do a radar vectored ILS approach. Yeah. Problem solved.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's the thing for those of you that are going into flight training. When you're talking about threat and error management, remember, it's not a tick box exercise. We're actually, and it's fine on some days to go, you know what, there's no real threats today. That's fine. We don't want to make them up. But if you do see something, and the best threat and error management is when it's woven through the brief, and we'll kind of give you some examples of that today. So we're going to kick off with a route check. And how would you normally do this, Petter? How would we run this as a 2-crew environment?
Right. So the route check is exactly what it sounds like. Now it's supposed to be a check of the route that has already been entered. So in this case, Ben is the pilot flying. He has entered it into the route. Now he's going to check that it's been correctly done. So I'm going to be reading out the route from my flight plan, and then he will be checking that it's actually correct, right? So this has to be done before we can execute the route. You see that you have that white execute light there now, that's just shining in our faces and wants to be pressed. We have to do this check first. and it's crucially important because you can make mistakes here.
Yeah.
And now is the time to find it out.
Yeah, it's a good one. So I say, Petter, right, let's go for a route check.
Okay, so now you're going to have to take up your flight plans again. And I would then, the first thing I would do actually is to verify that he is has been looking at the correct flight plan. Now, when you have a paper flight plan, it's a little bit redundant because you would have gotten a new one being sent out to you. But when we're using our electronic flight plans, it's actually really important because the flight plans do update. So I would ask him, okay, I've got OFP number 2 that you can see up in the left corner of your flight plan there, and verify that we're looking at the correct one, right? OFP 2.
OFP 2 I have.
Good stuff. So it's for a 737-800.
Yep.
You can see that next to number 1 there you see B738. So it's not 737 MAX. This is important because if you're working for an airline that have multiple types, you want to make sure that you're using a flight plan for the actual aircraft that you're about to fly, and there's not been a mistake there. Not so problematic if you're going from a NG to a MAX. The other way around is bad. Anyway, so we are going from Echo Golf Sierra Sierra to Echo India Delta Whiskey.
Yep.
Call sign Bravo Tango Romeo 001.
Correct.
Good. Now, and I would go down to the route again, and I will start. Okay, we're taking off from runway 22 via the Ottawa 1 Romeo to Ottawa, Quebec 75 to Bossard, Tango 420 to Trent, or Tango November Tango, Upper Lima 28 to Leldo, Mike 145 to Bagso, followed by the Bagso 3 Lima arrival into runway 28 right. Then, total distance is up here in the right-hand corner. It says 330 nautical miles.
Yeah, so the ground distance on the flight plan says 330, and then what you can do is go to your progress page, and then you can see it says Echo India Delta Whiskey 336. So the flight plan is saying it's 330 miles. The FM says 336. They very rarely exactly match up, but we're looking for a gross error check here. If that said 480 miles, you would be like, hang on a minute, something's not right. But 336 is certainly close enough. And good, I say 336. I would execute that now because I know that it's correct.
How much fuel do we have there, Ben?
Yep, and then I come back here and it says our arrival fuel is 3.8 tons, a very healthy 3.8 tons in Dublin.
Good. And we have a alternate fuel of 2.5. So
good.
That makes sense.
Yeah, so we're going to land with about 1.3 tons over and above our absolute minimum fuel on board. So that's a great thing. So we execute that, and that's the route check done. Now, the I of RIBETS is an instrument cross-check. So I'm going to read across what I see, and Petter would actually have a look as well, just to make sure that what I'm saying is matching on his side. Okay, so I say route check, and we start with the clocks and go across. So here it's 12:30 UTC. The QNH is 1021, giving me 330 feet, and we cross-check that across. The MFRA, which we spoke about in the Q&A today, again calculated from the OPT, is 1,348 feet. The flight directors are on. Now, if I just zoom in, flight directors are on, and I'm pilot flying, so mine is the master. So I have the green light on, not here. Mine's the master, and the standby instruments are set. So that's what we're looking for 045, 045, and everything is set. There's no flags we shouldn't have. So it'd be, 1231 UTC, 1021, giving me 330 feet, 1348 MFRA. Flight directors are on, mine's the master, standby instruments are set, and we cross-check that with the compass. Okay, so that's the intro. So the briefing. This is a standard briefing now where we just confirm how we're going to depart. So I'd say this is a 737-800, standard left-hand seat, flap 5 departure from runway 22 in Stansted, and it's noise abatement number 2. There's different noise abatement procedures that I can go into tomorrow if you'd like to learn more about those. But in Stansted, we're using noise abatement 2, which means we bug up and start the acceleration at 1,000 feet. We could also add other bits to that. Anything non-standard? Anything you'd add at the end of that if we needed to, Petter?
Yeah, so basically anything that is non-standard, if it's wet speeds, for example, if there's something that you want to highlight. I don't know.
Could be maybe, it could be anything like there could be an automatic frequency change once we get airborne. That could be something. Maybe the anti-ice might be on. Maybe even if I was going to hand fly, and maybe I wouldn't do it in Stansted, but if you wanted to hand fly the departure, you could brief that I'm going to hand fly the departure as well. But anything non-normal, but that's the kind of bare minimum. So we've done a route check, instrument cross-check, briefing. E is the emergency. So for the first flight of the day, we brief and remind ourselves of the emergencies we might expect on the ground and what we would do and what we wouldn't do. So I'll brief you now, Petter, for the emergency brief.
So that means that I'm going to have to be the FO.
So you're going to pretend to be the FO. I'll pretend to be the captain, and I will start the brief as I'm pilot flying. So I would say above 80 knots, I will only reject for an engine fire, fire warning, failure, predictive wind shear, or if the airplane is unsafe or unable to fly. If the call before V1 is stop, I'm going to simultaneously close the thrust levers, disengage the auto throttle, manually deploy the speed brake, confirm we have max RTO or max manual brakes, apply max reverse thrust. I'm going to bring the aircraft to a stop, and I'm going to set the parking brake.
Perfect. I will, if you call stop, I will monitor your actions and I will call out any omissions. I will call out 100 knots, 80 knots, 60 knots, and auto brake disarm. Once the aircraft has come to a complete stop and you've set the parking brake, I will set the flaps to 40 and I will notify ATC of our reject.
Good. And at that point, then it's important that we would slow everything down, and I'd brief that. We slow everything down, we'd evaluate the situation, we'd carry out any drills as appropriate. And if we decide to evacuate, we would read and do the evacuation checklist on the back of the QRH, the Quick Reference Handbook, which we had a look at in the Q&A today. And I would pull the Cockpit voice recorder CB, which is behind me here, so Petter can make a video about it in a few months. And what would you grab, Petter, if you were going to evacuate?
So we need to get the load sheets, if we have one of those, and NOTOC, which is anything that has to do with dangerous goods on board. All of that we need the load sheet because we need to know how many people were on board, so we can tell the fire chief, which is the one that's going to take command from us once we leave the aircraft. And obviously NOTOC, they will also need to know, so they know where it's stowed, what it is, and how to deal with it.
Exactly. And just one question, because it's a good one. Why do we go to flaps 40 when we reject a takeoff?
Excellent question. So this would be something that's very typical for the 737, and it has to do with the fact that we don't have any inflatable slides coming out of our overwing exits. Instead, the aircraft is so low to the ground that you can use the flaps to slide down onto the ground safely. So when you evacuate off a 737, both the MAX and the 737NG, you go out on the front emergency exits. There's actually this rail that you're supposed to take out and attach to the attach points. If you look out on the wing on the 737, you see that this little, I think it's a yellow attach point. That's for this. And then you're supposed to evacuate just sliding down the flaps. So if the flaps are not extended, then it will be a bit of a jump for the ones that are coming out that way. It's not going to be that bad, but it's going to be a bit of a jump.
Yeah, I mean, the top of the wing is probably, I mean, I'm 6'1"-ish, and I mean, the wings, it's just above my head. So it'd be like jumping off a 6-foot wall or something like that, which is not ideal. So by lowering the flaps, we get a nice curve and we can slide down, or the passengers can slide down. So it's a really good question.
Yeah.
So we flat 40 and then we go. So that's what we would do if we decided to stop and evacuate. If the call was keep going, if we're going to take the problem into the air, so if the call is keep going, we'll take no actions until a minimum of 400 feet. And then I'm going to state malfunction. We'll ask you to state malfunction. We'll carry out any memory items if there are any, and we will cancel any warnings. We're then going to climb straight ahead to our MFRA, which normally is 1,000 feet above airport elevation. So at 1348, at which point I'm going to call bug up, which is where I move my speed bug, this magenta bug, to where it says up. We're going to begin the acceleration. We'll retract the flaps on schedule. And once we get flaps are up and there's no lights, I'm going to ask you to engage level change. And we're going to go into the M1 and select max continuous thrust on the good engine. And then we're going to climb to the MSA and we're going to enter a hold. So we've now briefed what we're going to do if we stop and if we go. And most runways nowadays will have a engine out SID, an EO SID, which is an engine out standard instrument departure, which we have, and we would brief at this point. So, Peter, a couple of slight differences between a standard departure and an engine out one?
Yeah, so standard instrument departure, the ones that we have are about to brief how to fly, they are made for aircraft flying as they should with 2 engines working. They're taking into account things like noise abatement procedures, bank angles with 2 engines running, and it's basically done for aircraft that are not experiencing any kind of problem. But an engine out SID knows that this aircraft is experiencing a major malfunction. Hence, things like noise abatement procedures falls out the window. We want to make sure that it's as easy as possible for the pilot. So in most cases, an engine out SID is just straight ahead from the runway direction out to maybe a distance of 20 to 25 miles, and then enter a holding over a predetermined point at or above the minimum sector altitude, the safe altitude in that area.
Yeah.
So that's why it's important. You don't want to be sitting there trying to follow the SID as you're also dealing with an engine failure.
Correct. So it's something we would brief. Sometimes there's more complex ones. If you've got big mountains in front of you, it will turn you at a certain waypoint away from the terrain, and so on. But that's another topic that's quite an interesting one that we can look into in the future. But we would brief that at that point. So we've done the emergencies. So we've done the route check, the instrument, the briefing, the emergencies. We're now going to go to the T of RIBETS and do the taxi briefing. So I am going to just get this up here, taxi. And on the taxi chart, so we choose the taxi chart and we look at where we're actually parked. And today we're parked in London Stansted on 53 right, Charlie 53 right. So we identify where we are. We'd look out the window and it would actually say, my scenery is actually not updated, but it'd actually say 53 right out there. So we go, right, that's where we are. So we know where we are. We know we're using runway 22. So what we can do is look along that taxi chart and go, where do we think we're going to go? And in somewhere like Stansted, in this scenario, it's actually really simple. But if you're in Barcelona or Madrid or any big major airport, the taxi routing can be really, really complex. So it's important that we have a good mental picture and our mental models kind of match before we actually start taxiing the aircraft, because it can be really confusing, particularly when you add in, maybe we're unfamiliar with it. It could be nighttime, it could be foggy. You know, you can see all these Swiss cheese holes lining up and problems can start manifesting themselves. So I would say to you, Peter, right, we're on 53 right. We expect to push back onto the Charlie East line. You can see there's a west line, a middle, and an east line. If we're pushing back from from the eastern side of the apron, we would expect to go onto the east line. If we're on the other side, we might go to the west line. And if you're on a really big airplane with big wings, you'd have to go onto the central line. So I say we're going to go onto the east line, and from the east line, we're going to taxi out. Now, a threat here, talking about threat and air management, is you might have traffic coming in or taxiing out on the west line. And that means we're really close. Our wings are going to be really, really close. But as long as we're on our center line and we can visually see that the other aircraft is on their center line, we know that our wingtip clearance is safe and it's assured. So we would say, look, the threat here is ground collision. To mitigate that, we're going to make sure we're on our line. We're going to look to make sure they're on their line. And if we're not sure, we're going to tell ATC. We're going to stop and tell ATC. They will tell the other aircraft to stop. They'll probably send a marshaller out, like a yellow vehicle out to go and check. And we've avoided a ground collision and being in the news that evening.
Yeah, it's super tight. It looks super tight.
Oh, yeah. It looks, when you're looking out the way, it's horrible. When you look past and you taxi, it looks awful, doesn't it?
And the problem as well, this comes a little bit into the human anatomy, is that when we're taxiing, we're sitting straight ahead. And when you have people coming and you're passing things on your side, you don't really, like, even if you turn your head to try to look at it, your nose is in the way, right? You don't notice that, but it means that you lose depth perception. So it's super, super hard to actually judge whether or not you're going to crash into something when you're looking 90 degrees to the left like this, just because your right eye is actually not seeing what you're about to come to. So that it's, you have to straighten the lines, basically. You have to be really careful with that.
It's a really good point, because but after a couple of ground incidents globally, Boeing actually came out and said that they decided that it's actually visually impossible to judge whether you're going to clip the wing or not. They actually came out and said that.
Which is why we need cameras.
Which is why we need cameras. Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. Watch this space, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah, but cameras, we talked about that in the Q&A actually, but yeah, cameras would really make a big difference. Really
it's one of my personal crusades. I'll get some kind of cameras at some point.
Yeah, the Mentor cameras will be installed globally. That would make a big difference.
Oh, I'd love them to call that.
Good. So we talk about that, and then we're going to go out through Link Charlie, and you can see we probably expect holding point Sierra, possibly Romeo if it's busy. And you can see there's a little red circle around that says HS2. What does that alert us to?
That is standing for a hotspot.
Yep. So a hotspot is basically where there's been a potential for a collision. It's a hotspot for potential confusion or error for pilots, probably in nighttime low visibility. So it's just alerting the crew that there has been some issues there in the past. Basically, we need to be extra vigilant when we're turning around that part of the airport, because it's easy to go down the wrong one if you're not absolutely sure where you're going. So again, we would brief that. And I would say to the FO, look, if you think I'm about to take the wrong turn, just tell me immediately and I will just stop and then we will clarify it.
Which, by the way, is something that you always have to do. Like it is damages to the aircraft, collisions, accidents are by far the most common during the taxi phase, right?
Yeah.
This is when we damage aircraft. Normally, it doesn't come with any injuries, but it comes with significant costs, right?
Yeah.
If you clip every time that you see something on Instagram or Facebook where someone is just touching the side of the wingtip or whatever, we're talking tens of, not hundreds of thousands of dollars in damages every single time.
Yeah, it's certainly not something you ever want to do, and it's also a potential there because we're so close to the runway that if we suddenly lose our situation awareness, you can actually cross the stop bar, which is the latest point you can go without getting clearance. And as soon as you cross that stop bar, officially you're on the runway, even though you're actually not on it. And then that causes a whole heap of other problems. You know, you can have aircraft on the approach now that have to go around. You know, it gets messy. So when you see that, it just means have your wits about you, be on guard, be defensive. And if you're not sure, just stop and set the parking brake and ask ATC and everything's good. And lastly, so we've done the route, instrument, briefing, emergency, taxi. We finished the RIBETS with the SID, the standard instrument departure briefing. So that's what we're going to go on to now. Now, we go to the chart. We know we're expecting the Utava departure, but maybe before I would start briefing it, I would go and get the clearance from air traffic control, because there's nothing worse than doing a beautiful SID brief and then getting the clearance, and for one reason or another, they clear you on something different. And you're like, oh, now you've got to reprogram it, you've got to rebrief it. And it's just, if you'd just done it first, it would have saved all of that time. So if I would call for it, I'd make sure that I've got the frequency tuned. I won't bother. I'd say we're using Stansted Tower today because it's nice and quiet. Sure. The ATIS information from the weather that we got yesterday was alpha, and we're going to do it cool in standard way. And I'm going to demo that now, and Petter can be ATC. So it'd be Stansted Tower. Good afternoon. This is Butter 01 on stand 53. Right, we're a 737-800 with information alpha, requesting clearance, please, to Dublin.
Butter 001, a very good evening to you. Alpha is correct. You are cleared to destination Dublin via the Utava 1 Romeo flight plan route, squawk 1153.
And I'd repeat, we're cleared to Dublin, Utava 1 Romeo, squawk 1153, Butter 001.
Butter 001, that's readback correct.
Good. So now we would go in and I would have a little look, and we go into, if I just dive down to the FMC, I go, right, we're off runway 22. It's Utava 1 Romeo. And the squawk is the code that they give us to talk to, that basically pops us up on their radar screen. It's a unique code for every single flight. I didn't write it down. 1153, wasn't it?
Yep.
11. Let me just change. No, wrong one. It's easier in the real thing, I promise. 1153. There you go. So we know what we're up against, what we're going to be briefing. So now I'm going to brief this. I go, right, ready for a SID brief. And we go from there. So what I would do now is we kind of start at the big picture. So look at the overall picture of the chart, and then we kind of funnel that down into the nitty gritty, the real details. So first of all, I'd say at the top of the chart, we're on chart 30-3 Mike, and its effective date is a little black line next to it, 7th of September. So we're on the right chart, and we've both got the right update of the chart. It says here, some notes, transition altitude of 6,000 feet. So I'm going to go down to here and I just have a little look at, if you press init ref to your performance init, 6,000 feet. And I'm going to exit, that's your transition altitude where we go from QNH to a standard pressure setting. Note 1, it says when instructed, contact Stansted Director or London Control, and it tells you what to do. Talks about some noise routings and some other bits. Otherwise, nothing too much. Then we go down and we can see in red, Utava speed 250 below flight level 100, which is a standard speed. So you can see if you go to your climb page, you can enter a speed restriction here. So 250 / flight level 100. We know that that's going to be good. And then there's a warning underneath that. It says, due to interaction with other routes, do not climb above 4,000 feet until instructed, and no turns below 850. So I'd go, okay, the first waypoint, I go to my legs page, and you can see the very first altitude, the altitude on the right here, is 850A. And what does the A mean, Petter? What significance does that have?
That it is an at or above point. So it's not a hard altitude. It's just something that you have to make sure that you're above. And if you are, then it's fine.
That's it. So we know that we're going to meet that restriction that we have in that SID, in that chart. Then we can talk about the MSA, the minimum sector altitude. You can see it's broken into 4 quarters, and there's some numbers in like a reddy orangey color. And the top left, northwest, it's 2,000. To the northeast, it's 1,800, 1,700, 2,100. And these are the lowest altitudes we could fly if things start to go wrong in each sector. So we would generally round it up if it's nice and low and go, look, if we have any problems, 3,000 feet will keep us safe pretty much everywhere, and we're not going to hit anything. So we've got an awareness of that terrain around us. And then at the bottom there, we've got the routing. And what we would do now is read from the route on the chart and translate that to the FMC. And it's super important that when you're doing this, that you do actually go that way round, because there's a tendency for people to brief from the FMC and try and make what they see here fit the chart. And I've actually seen cadets brief me a wrong SID. It was a close SID, but it was the wrong SID just by doing that. And it was a bit of a shock to them at the end of the day that they actually realized they'd briefed the wrong one. So the way I would brief this is we would go to the bottom, and it says straight away, climb straight ahead to 3.1 miles on the ISX. So the ISX is, if you look at the chart, in the center of where Stansted is, you can see a frequency of 110.5, and next to that is ISX. And that's the frequency of the localizer, which is basically at the beginning of the runway. And it gives an ident. Every nav aid has an ident, a 3-letter ident that you could listen to using Morse code if you wish. So we're going to go to 3.1 miles with that tune. So I would come down here, if I just come here, and on our navigation, I would say, right, we've got 110.5 here and 110.5 here. And we're going to go to 3 miles. Now, we're going to go to the FMC, and we're looking for 3 miles, but we don't see a 3 miles. We see a Charlie. We can see a C. What's the significance of that C, Petter?
Yeah, so when they were building the FMC CDUs, obviously they realized that they had just a limited amount of characters that they could use for these waypoints. So they figured out we are going to have to give a lot of different distances, and we can't really write them out all the time. So what they did was they used the alpha pad on the CDU, and they gave each one of the letters the ability to show a distance. So alpha would be 1 mile, Bravo would be 2 miles, Charlie would be 3 miles, and so on. So in this case, yeah, it's not exactly 3.1, but it's indicating that it's the correct one, right? Yeah. It's the India Sierra X. It's the India Sierra X-ray at, in this case, a 223 Charlie. So it's a 3 miles. So we know that, yeah, okay, they have coded this correctly.
Yeah, exactly. So we're looking for either a 3.1 here or a letter, and that letter should closely correspond to it. I saw Richard Miller on, big Rich Miller here. Just say a big hello to Rich, good friend of ours.
Excellent. Hi, Rich.
Hey. So yeah, 3.1 miles. And then it says we're going to turn right. So I look up on the chart here. What we could do is we could go to, if you want to have a look, we can go to our plan mode. So you can see on our EFIS control panel up here, if you move this one to PLN to plan, and look what happens on your nav display, it shows you, I'm just going to increase the range a little bit, basically what you're going to see on the chart. You can see, if you're seeing the chart and my screen at the moment, you can see that now this looks very similar to what you're seeing on your chart. So it says turn right. So as a gross error check, I'm going to say, yep, that is a right turn. So that's looking good. Then it says to intercept the Barkway 169 radial inbound. Now this, I don't want to get, it's something we can go into a bit more detail tomorrow, but Barkway, BKY, if you look on the chart, is a navigation aid to the northwest of Stansted. And these navigation aids, VORs, they transmit effectively, if you think of it like the spoke of a bike wheel, like a radio wave is the easiest way of thinking it. For every degree, every point of the compass, it's radiating out. And what it's telling us to do is we can track these radials in and outbound to the VOR. So they're always called radials. So the reference is the 169 away from Barkway, but we're flying to it. It says inbound. So the reciprocal of that, if you look at the chart, is 349. So I would set on here on my course selector 349, and I'll tell you why in a moment. And down in here, you can see that it's a right turn and we're tracking 350. It's within a degree. So that's kind of sensible. And we would set 349 on this, and we've got Barkway tuned. And if you look at the frequency on the chart, it's 11625. I've got it in standby. So this is the active, what it's actively tracking, but we can flip these over. So now we're tracking Barkway. So Peter, why would you have that set up on yours? If you're going to go flying now today, what's the benefit of having that standby frequency in this course selector set up?
So we are flying very modern and nice looking machines that have a lot of fancy autopilot functions to it, one of which is to fly in LNAV, right? So we're flying LNAV, VNAV, which is basically just IRS or GPS positions that we can follow, just like you would if you're flying or if you're driving a self-driving car, right? But sometimes bad things happen. And among those can be that we lose our RNAV, BRNAV capability. So for some reason, we have a FMC failure, for example, during departure, or a part of our navigational system malfunctions. And in that case, we have to really quickly be able to resume what we call conventional navigation. And that is flying on these radios. This is what you learn when you do your IFR rating. And it's basically just, all right, go over to heading select, switch over to VOR rows on the navigation display, and then start flying according to these radios, according to the old good steam gauges that we used to have. So in our mind, we are briefing, we're making sure that the FMC is properly set up so that it can do this when we press LNAV. But we also think, if this disappears, what's going to be the distance when I need to start turning? What radial am I going on to? So that you can resume that lazy quickly and not have to start to kind of like, oh man, where's my shot?
Yeah. So we're kind of ready to go. I mean, I've only had a total FMC failure once, but it just suddenly everything just goes. And if you're not prepared for it, it's going to make your life a bit tricky.
How long did it stay on for you?
Well, I've had it quite a lot recently in the Max, and it comes back. But on the final time it happened, it actually happened and stayed for the entire. We lost it for the entire flight. The whole lot went.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah.
Me too.
Yeah.
We had a lightning strike, and it just busted the CDU, the FMC.
Oh, so really?
And we flew from Girona to Stansted, and we thought, that's fine. There's no problem. Like when this happens, worst case scenario, you ask for a radar vector and you get a vector, and it's nice and calm. It doesn't matter. And that's what we thought was going to happen when we got into the London TMA. Right? So we got into London, and it was like, Butter 005, we have a negative RNAV, request arrival route. And they're like, well, okay, interesting to know. Resume standard navigation. And they gave us the arrival route. So we were sitting there like, oh, you have to be level 20 before Mayfield, and then you have to go, and then you have to turn outbound. And we were sitting there scratching our heads, and I could almost hear the 737-200 pilots, which were flying at the time, laughing through the frequency. That's literally what they were doing every day. And them, they were like, oh, now look at the MG guys that's coming in now. I have no idea how they're going to
Yeah, you certainly earn your money those days, don't you? Yeah, it's but it's it works and it's good fun, and but you do have to, because it's suddenly sprung on you. You're like, oh, I've got to think about this. But it works. I mean, Rich here is he used to fly the 737. He now flies the mighty A380. I said I wouldn't hold that against him, but the A380 again, it's got some backup systems in there as well, and that's a fascinating airplane. But anyway, back to this. So he said a right turn 350. Sorry, 169 inbound, 349 inbound by D8. So if we come back to this, so from 8 miles from Barkway. So if I'm going to use, I'm not going to look up here yet. 8 miles, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. I'm looking for a hotel point. There it is, hotel point. So it's making a right turn to the hotel point. And then it says cross D5 at or above 3,000 feet. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, echo. It says cross it above 3,000 feet. So there we see 3,000 or above. The A is above, so we know that works. Then to 2 miles from Barkway at 4,000. So 2 miles, 1, 2, Bravo. Sure enough, there's the 2 mile point. And it says at 4,000 feet, and it says intercept Barkway 262 to Yatava. Now it says 261 to Yatava, and what I would then do is on the standby, we could just set this up as a ready to go. If I go to 261 on here for the same reason that we could do it before. And I say to Petter, okay, what do you make the actual first stop altitude, the limit altitude we can fly to on this departure?
Well, then I'm going to look down at my chart and I'm going to have a look, and I can see that it says, for example, max 4,000 here, and I can look and I can have a look at the chart here, and I see that, yeah, 4,000 feet is going to be the stopping altitude in this case.
Good. And as you can see at the moment, we've got 4,100, which I know is a question that's come up quite a lot. So we set that. I would set what I think it's going to be plus 100 feet. So that when we look at our MCP, we know we haven't got the clearance yet, and or we haven't agreed what the stop altitude is. And I would always ask the other pilot first, what do they think it is? Because if I've got it wrong in my mind and I go, I think it's 5,000 feet, it's very easy for them, if they're thinking about other things, to go, yeah, and we just do it. But by me asking, it's a human factors element. It prompts Petter, as he said, to look at the chart and go, yeah, I think it's 4,000 feet. And I go, oh yeah, absolutely, it is 4,000. And it would catch that little error in there. So I would agree with him. I go, yeah, it's 4,000 down here. And I would now, we've got the clearance. We wouldn't set it until we've got the clearance, but we've got the clearance. So I've got it once, twice, 4,000 feet. And that is a SID. That's the RIBETS. That finishes off with the S, a RIBETS brief. And now, normally the doors would be closing. The passengers would be boarded. Number 1 would come in and do their bits. We're ready to close the door. And that's where we'll run the full before takeoff checklist, which is on your workbook. So again, if you want to get these checklists, it's in the workbook inside the Facebook group. And we'll demo how we're going to read that. And I'll also talk about how you would do it afterwards if we're doing it single pilot. So if Petter can get that before start checklist up, we'll demonstrate how we would actually run this in real time. And I might change my view to start with.
Okay, let's see. I am going to go down. Let's see. We'll do that instead.
Yeah, have we got clearance, Clarence? Just don't call me Shirley.
Roger, over.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's have a look then. You ready for the before start checklist?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So, IRS mode selectors.
Nav.
Gear pins.
So the gear pins they should be 3, 1 for each main gear. And there's 1, 2, 3 here, so that we know they're not accidentally left in the gears. Because if they're left in, when we go gear up, they're not coming up. So we check that they're back installed in their housing. So 3 removed.
Light test.
We did that yesterday. It's checked.
Oxygen.
Tested 100%.
Yaw damper.
On.
Nav transfer and display switches.
So these are normal in the middle positions and auto.
Fuel.
So we go to the flight plan now, and we would look at the flight plan. I'll tell you what we need. So to make sure we've got a gross error. So the flight plan minimum is 6177 kilos. And I've got 6.5 tons on board. So we've got more. And we've got 4 pumps on. There's nothing in the center pumps, so their center pumps are off.
Perfect. Cab utility, IFE, and galley power.
They're on.
Emergency exit lights.
Armed.
The fasten belts.
On.
Window heat.
On.
Air condition and pressurization.
So we've got PAX auto, bleeds on, and set.
So like this. There we go. And you'll notice, guys, that when I'm reading this, I am reading, I'm waiting for his response, listening to what his response is, but then I'm also verifying that the response is correct.
Yeah.
So it's read, look, listen, basically. Yeah. And you have to do that, like, because it's so easy, especially when there's time pressure, to start rhyming responses, because we all know these responses, what they should be by heart. So they have to be, this is something that you have to be awake for. You have to take your time, no matter how much time pressure you're on, this cannot be stressed.
No, if you get this wrong, it will cause accidents, incidents. People can die. It sounds like we're over sort of emphasizing that, but that read, look, listen philosophy is so important, and not to rush these, just to take our time.
Yeah.
Good.
So, I'll repeat that: air condition and pressurization.
Pax auto, bleeds on, set.
Thank you. Pressurization mode selector.
Auto.
Instruments.
Are cross-checked. We did that in the rivets.
Auto brake.
Is RTO.
The hydraulics.
If I come down to system here, we're looking to make sure that we've got 3000 PSI and above 72%, so they're normal.
Good. Speed brake.
Here. Speed brake's down D10, and we do a final config check where we get the mank noise, so we make sure we do. So speed brake's down.
Parking brake.
It's not set, so I'm now going to set the parking brake. So why might the brakes be off at this point?
So if this is a turnaround, we normally, after landing, the brakes are really, really hot. They accumulate a lot of energy when we're braking. So what we do is, once we get on stand and we have the chocks set at least 2 wheels, so the main wheel and the nose wheel, then we can release the parking brake. And that way there will be more airflow past the brake discs, and they will cool down faster. So generally speaking, we always release the parking brake during the turnaround.
Good. Yeah. So parking brake is set.
Stab trim cutter switches.
So that's here. Stab trim cutter switches are in normal.
The wheel of fire warning
is checked.
Radius, radar, and transponder.
So these are now all set and on standby.
Rudder and aileron trims.
We checked them yesterday, are 3 and 0.
Takeoff briefing
is discussed.
PA.
We would do a PA, welcoming everyone on board at this point. So PA, we would say, is complete.
FMC CDU.
So FMC CDU. So that's the flight management computer control display unit. So generally speaking, pilot flying will have the takeoff page. So to get there, you can either go to route and then takeoff. And pilot monitoring would have the legs page, so we can see where we're going. So that's what we would depart with. So that's now set.
Perfect. The N1 IS bugs.
Okay, so the N1, we have it set. So we're looking up here. So we got the M1 and ASB bugs. We make sure that these selectors are in auto, because that's what is automatically generating our calculated N1 and our ASB. So we go auto. We've got 22K reduced to 91.6, and we've got speeds of 40, 41, and this is the important step, 46, and that prompts us now to go up here and set the V2. That would normally be set when we did the performance, which we kind of did quite quickly today because we wouldn't have had time. So that's set.
Good. This was where were we? We were at
M1 and ASB bugs.
There we go. Stabilizer trim.
So stab trim. So we go from the FMC. So 6.1 units set.
Performance, weight and balance
is signed and sent.
Thank you. EFB
is aeroplane mode and stowed. So we would stow our EFB on the iPad mount here. So we make sure it's in aeroplane mode and we would stow it.
Good. Flight deck windows and cockpit door.
Yeah, so we would, Petter spoke about windows opening yesterday. So basically we would bang this handle, knock it forward and just pull it to make sure that it is actually locked and it's not going to open. And the cockpit door we check is locked as well.
Good. Doors.
So we look up here and we've still got the forward entry door. So we're checking to see if these are black. So I can go in here actually. If I just go to menu and I go to FS actions and I go to doors, I can go to close door. And I go back to menu and I go back to FMC takeoff. Now, if I look up here, this is the door panel. Maybe if I go to this view, it's probably a bit easier. We're looking for all of these to be off black, which means none of the doors are open. So doors are closed.
Thank you. And finally, passengers.
The passengers. So once the cabin crew have got everyone on board, they're all seated, they will give us a sign to let us know that they're seated. And we would put this into the middle position to let us know that the cabin is secure. Back in the day in the 300, we used to have a little switch down here that you could go cabin secure and not secure, green and red, but they've taken those away. But yeah, passengers are now seated and we're ready to go.
Perfect. That's before start checklist down to the line. Now, before I continue, there's going to be questions about, there's some black asterisks on the checklist.
Yes.
the ones that have black asterisks are through parts. So that those are checklist points that we only call out if we're doing a turnaround. So this is the first flight of the day, so we do the whole checklist. But if it's an asterisk next to it, those are the ones that are going to be called out during the next flight when we do the turnaround and to come back. Because some of these things we only move once during the day.
Yeah, we don't need to check them again. So yeah, and I can go into more on that tomorrow in the live Q&A. But now we've got ourselves into a position where we've done the hard work and we're now getting into the good bit. We're now getting into the part where we're ready to, the aircraft is now fully ready now to come alive with the engines. So we're now getting ready to push back, to start engines, to taxi out and get airborne. And that's what we've got to look forward to tomorrow. We're going to get into the action. We're actually going to get airborne and we're going to show you all the procedures that we would do going from this point to get us safely airborne, climbing away on our way to Dublin. And that's what we got to look forward to tomorrow. Awesome. But yeah, lots of questions. I'm sure I can see lots of questions in there. So don't forget them. I'm going to be putting a Q&A link up in the group tonight and tomorrow. If you've got questions you want to ask and you're not going to make it to the Q&A because you're working or time zones, just post them in there and I will do my absolute best to answer it for you. Or if you can join us live, it's a lot of fun. Come and join live. We can go through and I'll take, we had a huge variety of topics today. It's a great fun thing to do. So come along for the Q&A tomorrow. And tomorrow we're getting into the real action. We're really going to show you how to get from this state now, get us safely airborne. And we've got that to look forward to. But absolute pleasure seeing so many of you again today. A real pleasure. Also those on the Mentor Now channel, Petter, it's been great to have them here as well.
Absolutely, absolutely. I like I said, it's always fascinating when you go through and explain this. Now we've been doing this for almost 3 hours to get the aircraft to push back.
Yeah.
But in reality, guys, we do this in literally 15 minutes, right? So you do there's 10 minutes where we kind of, you know, the pilot monitoring is going to be outside, or the pilot flying is still going to be setting up and things. But the rivets part takes 15 minutes, generally speaking. That's why we'll have a look at the clock and we say, okay, it's 15 minutes to go. We really should be starting with the rivets. If we started with less time than that, we're generally going to be late. But what we've done today, more or less, it's going to take, 15, 17 minutes to do, not the hour and 20 minutes that we've just done it in.
Yeah, exactly right. And it's just practice. So what I'd love you to do is do a bit of homework, have a go from the cold, dark setup all the way through to this. And it's not a race. It's far better to do it right and do it properly than it is to do it quickly and make some mistakes. So don't think about time. The time will come the more you practice with it.
Yeah, that's something we tell the cadets all the time. They think that they have to rush in order to do things quicker. In fact, you have to slow down to do it properly. And once you do it properly, it's going to be quicker and quicker and quicker for each time you do it.
Yeah. But rushing is the enemy of aviation. I think there's so many things have happened in the past where people rush. So slow it down. Thank you for those putting the speed brake had popped up. The speed brake is now deployed. But yeah, we're now ready to push and start. And we're going to take you through exactly how we would do it, why we would do it, and actually get you flying tomorrow. Really looking forward to that. Tomorrow, 1700 again, back in the Facebook group, Mentor Now as well. And all well and good. I will see you tomorrow afternoon for the live Q&A at 12 UTC. But yeah, have a great evening, everybody. Absolute pleasure as always. And we'll see you tomorrow.
Thanks a lot, guys. It's been lovely to be here. See you tomorrow. See you tomorrow evening.
Take care. Bye.